Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, let's say thank to our God. Because of Him, we can still healthy and happy right now. Alright, we are from group 2 and we are going to present about our assignment, Literature in Language Education. But first, I will introduce all my members in my group. Okay, my name is Rijusda as the first speaker, and she is Alifa Umayyah, the second speaker. Over there, Nurul Hairani, the third speaker, and she is Sri Wahyuni, the fourth speaker, and the last is Fitriani HR. Well, I'm going to explain three parts in here. The first is literature in language education. The second is culture is conversation, and the last is the literary curriculum origins and evolution. Number 1. There are 5 reasons why teaching English. The first, personal growth view. The second is cross-curricular view. The third is adult needs view. And the fourth is culture heritage. And the last is culture is analysis. Let's start for number 1, personal growth view. What I'm going to explain here, we focus on child, emphasize the relationship between child and learning in education. As we know that seems like we try to develop all the quality of their life. Seems like literature in education. As a teacher, we have to teach them the imaginative and aesthetic of life. The second is cross-curricular. This is, we focus on child education in their school. Okay, as a teacher, we have to teach them all the subject. Never settle them, just teach one subject because they will not understand more subject. So teach them as much as you can. And number 3 is adult needs. What I'm going to explain here, adult needs is talking about the skills. As we know, as a good teacher, we have to teach them reading skill, writing skill, speaking skill, and all about language education. So literature in language education cannot separate into their life in daily activity. So teach them as much as you can. And number 4 is culture is heritage. In here, culture is heritage. We're talking about the responsibility of schools to them. What I'm going to explain here, if child or children already understand deeply about literature in language education, how the school responsibility of them? Yes, of course, give them appreciate. Yes. And the last is culture is analysis. Yeah, if we're talking about culture is analysis, we have to think that all children, all people, they are birth in another and different country, right? So language is the more important in their life because with language, they can understand the different culture in the world. Okay, the second part is culture is conversation. What do you think about culture is conversation? Of course, culture is conversation. We're talking about language. Yeah. As we know that most of people, if they want to get like a job, or if you want to have more friends, oh, you have to understand about language. Yes, because culture is conversation, you have to know about language. Of course, English have so many benefits, like get a job, you will have a friend from another country, of course. And seems like literature in language education cannot be separate because literature in language education and learning English, they are both most important in our life. Okay, the last part is the literary curriculum origins and evolution. Okay, in here we are talking about 19th century and European. Okay, in the past, literature and education is already centered in there because they they talking about what is literature and how literature apply in their Central European and yeah, and the result is the literature education began to emphasize to literature in their literatures in the official language being taught. Yeah, even until now, people ask about how and why, but as a children, they have to understand more about literature in language education because literature in language education can helpful them to understand more deeply about what is language, and because in literature language education is not about talking about how their quality, because here we're talking about how can they have a good life with aesthetic of life. Yeah, of course, with literature in education. Yeah, that's all for me. For the second speaker, Alifa Umaya, time's yours.
Okay, I will explain about what is literature, what is value. Talking about what is literature and value of literature, it is quite difficult to explain land. We can understand it like language because literature consists of under rhetorical and we books that they are not so many, but literature talking about truth and human passion. Mostly people who teach literature know and understand deeply about human nature because they teach us human nature with language. So, literature with imagination can helpful also to touch children and more make them understand deeply what the value of literature. The value of English learner. This is quite unique because the value of English to learners. This is quite unique because English communication to position then within a new impression seems like other subject as we know literature it might ask new knowledge for children which is to understand it have to imagination person.
Okay, the third speaker, Nurul Hairani, time's yours.
The literature in second language teaching. So the first one that is traditional approach. So commonly or usually, the literature used in traditional approach in terms of education of foreign language university. So they are a bit ignored or they are not really focused on linguistic, that is, which is we can know that the linguistic consists are semantic, syntax, phonology, and what else? Morphology. The second one, communicative language teaching or CLT. So the literature see or view by this course and the text of the literature and the other text, it's almost same or we can say it's equal, and they have their own culture. So this is novel. We know that novel is one of the literature and this is lessons book. So both novel and lessons book, they are same or we can say equal. The text of novel and the lessons book is equal. And both novel and the lessons book has their own culture. The last is the productive consonant of CLT. So what I get from here, that is every single person has their own perception, has their own argument. So from what they get, from what they listen, from what they read, or from what they see, it will make a different response, also different perception, and a different argument.
Well, Sri Wahyuni, time's yours.
Thank you for the chance. I will explain what essential literature reading. For the first, essential literature in one education. As Miss Cap 1984 notes that the first record of use English as an academic subject in Oxford English Dictionary. As Anderson said, that the reader respect to the literary text in personally meaningful, so that many students didn't understand the flying about literature because this is thought about meaningful of word in imagination. And the second, essential literature in L2 education. Well, this is thought about an assessment. Literature reading should be connected with language, and to understand it have relate with correct language. Maybe this is quite difficult to understand it because literature should be related with correct to be good literacy.
Okay, the last speaker, Fitriani HR, time's yours.
Okay, thanks for the time. I will explain about literature into cultural study. Literature, their discourse, and culture. Culture is increasingly understood in dynamic terms, constructed interactively between people constantly, particularly through languages. So, talking about literature into cultural study, or we know and understand that literature and cultural study cannot be separate. Language and culture also relate each other, so they are important things. Literature with language useful for study in many countries. Thank you.
Well, that's all explanation about literature in language education. Just we explain. Well, the highlights of literature in language education. The first is literature in language education. The second is culture is conversation. The third is the literary curriculum origins and evolution. And the fourth is why literature in language education is the second language with a traditional approach. And then the assessing literature in reading for L1 and L2 education. And the last is the literature and culture studies. Well, that's all for me for our group today. Thank you so much for the chance. We say sorry for all the mistake that we have to do today. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.